What happens when one of television's most fearless political commentators goes toe-minus, to toe with one of the most scrutinized public figures of our time? What started as a late-night interview quickly devolved into a fiery showdown that shook the very foundation of The Daily Show. Tonight, we live the now infamous clash between Jon Stewart and Meghan Markle, in an exchange so intense it left the studio reeling and audiences divided. The set glowed warmly, cameras sweeping across the energized crowd. Jon Stewart, freshly returned from his latest political commentary run, sat confidently behind the desk, flashing his signature smirk. The audience buzzed in anticipation. Tonight, Jon announced, we're joined by Meghan Markle, former actress, former royal, current podcaster, and perpetual headline magnet. You? Meghan entered in a crisp cream blouse and navy skirt, her smile carefully measured. Thank you, Jon, she said coolly, taking her seat. It's always a joy to explain myself. Again, Jon blinked, caught off guard by the tone. Well, he chuckled, I was aiming for a warmer welcome, but we'll roll with it. The audience laughed. Meghan didn't, Jon leaned in. Let's start with your foundation. You've spoken about service and change. What's been the most fulfilling part of that journey? Oh, Meghan's smile didn't budge. Service isn't about fulfillment for me. It's about impact. I thought someone like you, who critiques power structures for a living, would understand that. A ripple moved through the crowd. Jon smiled tightly. Fair point. I was just curious about your personal experience. Oh, next time, Meghan said, brushing a speck from her sleeve, you might phrase it better. The air thickened. Still, Jon pressed on, you've spoken out against the royal family and the press. Do you worry that retelling your story distracts from causes like mental health, racial justice, and gender equity? Meghan's eyes narrowed. Distracts or amplifies? Maybe it highlights them in ways your nightly punchlines never could. I speak my truth. That's different from making jokes. Jon raised a hand. I'm not disagreeing with your right to speak. I'm just asking if I should be quiet and pleasant to make you comfortable. The crowd murmured, some clapping, others frozen. Jon exhaled slowly. That's not what I meant. I'm suggesting repetition can come across as, self-centered? She cut in. When you're silenced by racism and hostility, repeating yourself is survival. Jon nodded, eyes steady. Strong answer. But let's keep this a conversation, not a trial. Meghan shot back. Maybe conversations wouldn't feel like trials if people stopped cross-examining me. Jon pivoted. Your podcast tackles tough issues, but critics say it feels more self-promotional than activist. Thoughts? Meghan tilted her head. Critics usually write from their mom's basements in pajamas. They haven't lived what I have. Their opinions are noise. I don't dignify noise, the audience reacted. Some applause, some groans. Jon restrained a smirk. Fair. But this is late-night TV. Noise is part of the gig. Then maybe I'm on the wrong show, Meghan quipped. The studio stilled. Jon's smile faltered. For the first time, the interview felt unstable. Jon tried again. You've criticized media and the monarchy, but some see your success as contradictory to your message. You're thriving while claiming to be silenced. Meghan leaned back. People hate successful women who don't beg for approval. If I disappeared, they'd call me irrelevant. If I thrive, I'm a hypocrite. Same old story, But can you see how others view it as profiting from pain while living in luxury? Their interpretation, not mine. No, I'm not responsible for their projections, Jon replied. You call out tabloids for twisting narratives. Isn't there some irony? You've built a career on punchlines. That jab landed like a slap. Jones smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sure, but I don't cash in on family drama. You know, he moved to mental health. Your story matters. But do you think it connects with everyday people who lack access to therapy and security? Meghan sat forward. Suicidal thoughts don't check your bank account. Mental health doesn't discriminate, agreed, Jon said gently. But could your platform spotlight those without resources, instead of circling back to your own story? So now I'm spokesperson for everyone? That's rich. Coming from a man who reads cue cards for a living, Jones steadied himself. Do you think your advocacy ever crosses into revenge? Meghan smirked. If I wanted revenge, you'd know. I've shared only a fraction. Men like you love calling women bitter when we speak up. Joan leaned back. No, what's bitter is turning every answer into a lecture. I'm not your enemy. I'm asking what people want to know. Meghan clapped slowly. Congratulations, Jon. You've joined the club of men who think challenging me makes them brave. Joan's jaw tightened. I don't need to feel brave. My job is to ask questions. What I'm seeing is someone who won't reflect on whether her message matches her actions. Meghan's gaze sharpened. Careful, Jon. You might regret this ambush. Joan didn't flinch. Or maybe we're finally getting to the real issue. The audience squirmed in silence. Joan asked plainly. You accused the royal family of racism, but wouldn't name names. Names? Doesn't that hurt the cause you claim to support? No? So you want me to put targets on people's backs? That's not journalism. That's blood sport. No, that's accountability. You can't light a fire and feign surprise when people want to know who struck the match. Meghan fired back. You don't know racism. Maybe sit this one out. The crowd gasped. Jon's smile faded. You're right. I haven't lived it, but I know that real advocacy includes specifics, not just brand building, victimhood. Is that tonight's soundbite, Jon? Congrats, you've joined the tabloids. Jones set down his pen. I don't chase headlines. I ask hard questions when things don't add up, push back, or tear down. You don't do this to all guests, just women who won't shrink under your spotlight. Let's talk privacy. You said you left for peace. But here you are on shows, podcasts, documentaries. Can you see why people call that hypocrisy? Yeah, Meghan laughed. Cold, lazy argument. Privacy doesn't mean silence. It means choosing what you share. Maybe that's too complex for some, Joan bristled. I get boundaries. But when every boundary leads to a multi-million-dollar deal, people question motives. Profit? You mean survival. I built a life where we're not hunted. Forgive me for not hiding behind a desk. The audience booed. Joan leaned forward. I've interviewed people who faced real threats and never demanded sympathy because the press was mean. Meghan smiled sharply. What makes my story exceptional is that it's mine. And what bothers you is that I won't shut up and play nice. Joan's tone chilled. What bothers me is confusing defiance for depth. Advocacy isn't just telling your story. It's listening too. Let's cut through it. You say you wanted privacy, yet you built a media empire around your name. Isn't that contradictory? Controlling the narrative isn't hypocrisy. It's survival. You pretend to care while mocking everything that doesn't fit your worldview. I think you've built an empire out of grievance, and deep down, you know it. Meghan slammed her hand on the chair arm. You don't get to decide which parts of my pain are valid. The room froze. You say you want truth, but you dodge accountability, Jon said. And you came here to humiliate me. No, Jon replied firmly. You made it a spectacle. She stood abruptly. I don't need this. I don't need you. This show doesn't deserve me. Audience gasped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jon said, facing the camera, "rarely do I have to do this, but we've reached that point. Get her off my set." Security moved. Meghan snapped, "Don't touch me. I'll leave on my own terms." "You." She stormed off. The echo of her heels rang across the silent studio. Jon adjusted his tie, exhaled slowly, and faced the audience. "Well, that wasn't in the script." you know? He turned to the camera. "I've done hundreds of interviews, but never escorted someone out. This one will go down in late-night history." Applause erupted. Stunned, conflicted, awkward. Narrator voice. Meghan Markle once again left an institution behind, this time in flames. And for the first time in his career, Jon Stewart showed his patience had limits. But what do you think? Was Jon right to press for answers? Or did Meghan's fury reveal a double standard in how we treat outspoken women? Let us know in the comments. And if this story stunned you, hit like and subscribe. You won't want to miss the next celebrity clash that takes late-night TV completely off the rails.